Did anyone ever tell you that your relationship is a disaster? Have you ever thought your ex was causing an international incident? What about your dating life, sending shockwaves through entire kingdoms? Number 5. Catherine of Valois and the Welsh heartthrob. Imagine a queen still young, already a widow. Catherine of Valois had known a life few could fathom. She was born a French princess, daughter of King Charles VI. Her childhood was steeped in the political turmoil of the 100 Years' War, a seemingly endless conflict between England and France. Her future, like that of many royal women, was not her own. It was a bargaining chip, a way to forge alliances, or perhaps, if lucky, to bring peace. Catherine's life took a dramatic turn when, in 1420, at the age of 18, she was married to King Henry V of England. This was not a love match, at least not in the romantic sense. It was a strategic union, part of the Treaty of Troyes, which aimed to unite the crowns of England and France. Henry V was a formidable warrior king, a man of immense power and ambition, who had just triumphed at the Battle of Agincourt. He was known for his piety and his stern demeanor, a stark contrast to the young French princess. Their wedding was grand, befitting their stations a symbol of a fragile new alliance. For a brief period, Catherine experienced the height of royal glory. She was Queen of England, and shortly after their marriage, she bore a son, Henry VI, who would become the heir to both the English and, potentially, the French thrones. But her royal bliss was tragically short-lived. Just 2 years after their wedding, in 1422, King Henry V died suddenly, leaving Catherine a 21-year-old widow. Her infant son was now King of England, and the dream of a united Anglo-French monarchy lay shattered, leaving England embroiled in continued conflict in France. This sudden widowhood plunged Catherine into a unique and precarious position. As the Queen Dowager and mother of the infant king, she held significant influence, but also faced immense scrutiny. In medieval England, royal widows were expected to uphold their dignity and serve as a figurehead for their young children. For queens, remarriage was not forbidden, but it was highly controlled. Any new marriage had to be approved by the King's Council, and it usually had to be a political alliance that benefited the kingdom, not just a personal desire. Prospect of a queen marrying a commoner or someone of lesser rank was almost unthinkable. Such a union could undermine the legitimacy of the royal line and compromise the crown's dignity. The stakes were incredibly high for Catherine. The English Regency Council, which now governed in young Henry VI's name, was very protective of Catherine. They passed a specific parliamentary statute in 1427, stating that no one could marry a Queen of England without the king's express permission, and any such marriage would result in the forfeiture of all lands and goods. This law was a clear warning, a barrier designed to prevent any unsuitable match that might endanger the stability of the realm. It was meant to keep Catherine's private life firmly under public control. Catherine was a woman of spirit, and perhaps loneliness. Her court was filled with various attendants and squires, men who served in administrative and ceremonial roles. Among these was a young Welshman named Owen Tudor. Owen was not of noble birth. His family were respectable Welsh landowners, but they were a long way from the royal circles of London and Paris. He was described as handsome and modic, perhaps with a dash of the rebellious spirit that ran through his Welsh ancestry. Accounts from the time suggest he was part of the royal household, possibly a clerk of the wardrobe or an esquire of the Queen's household, a position that brought him into close proximity with Catherine. The details of how their relationship began are shrouded in secrecy and later romanticized legend. Some stories suggest he caught her eye with his impressive dancing or his athletic prowess. Others say he stumbled and fell into her lap an amusing accident that broke down courtly barriers. Whatever the exact spark, a clandestine romance blossomed between the young Queen Dowager and the Welsh squire. It was a secret, forbidden affair, an act of defiance against the rigid expectations of royal life. The precise date of their marriage is unknown, further highlighting its clandestine nature. It likely occurred sometime in the early 1430s, away from the prying eyes of the court and the watchful gaze of the council. This marriage was not proclaimed from the rooftops, nor celebrated with pomp and ceremony. It was a quiet, private affair, perhaps even without a formal church ceremony given its illicit nature under the King's Council's statute. This secrecy was paramount. If discovered, the consequences for both Catherine and Owen would be severe. Over the next few years, Catherine and Owen had several children. Their first son, Edmund, was born around 1430 or 1431, followed by Jasper in 1431 and Owen, Thomas, around 1432. They also had a daughter, Margaret, who likely died in infancy. The existence of these children, particularly boys, presented a massive problem. They were half-siblings to the King of England, but born out of a union that was either illegal or at least highly improper. Council, though perhaps initially unaware, surely began to notice Catherine's growing isolation from court life and the rumors swirling around her. The whispers eventually became too loud to ignore the scandal. Began to break in the mid-1430s. King's Council, dominated by powerful lords like Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, the young king, Henry VI's uncle, grew increasingly suspicious and concerned. They saw Catherine's actions as a profound disrespect to the monarchy and a potential threat to the stability of the realm. The idea of the Queen Dowager Mother of the King having a secret family with a commoner was simply outrageous in their eyes. Chipped away at the divine right of kings and the carefully constructed social hierarchy. The fallout was swift and decisive. In 1436, the council acted. Owen Tudor was arrested. He was imprisoned in Newgate Prison and later moved to Wallingford Castle. He managed to escape from Wallingford Castle once, only to be recaptured. This demonstrated his audacious spirit, but also the severity with which the council viewed his actions. He was seen as having presumed far above his station, daring to entangle himself with royal blood. Catherine herself was not imprisoned, but her freedom was severely curtailed. She was removed from court and confined to Bermondsey Abbey in London. This was not a prison in the traditional sense, but it was certainly a form of internal exile, designed to separate her from Owen and to control her influence. The separation from her children from Owen must have been heartbreaking. Her younger children, Edmund and Jasper, were taken from her and sent to live with a woman named Catherine de la Pole, a nun at Barking Abbey, to be raised away from the scandalous origins of their birth. They were kept under strict supervision, perhaps even out of sight, for fear of the implications their existence might have. Catherine, weakened by her confinement and possibly by her earlier childbirths, died at Bermondsey Abbey in January 1437, just a few months after Owen's imprisonment and her own forced isolation. Her death at the relatively young age of 35 left her children from Owen in an even more precarious position. They were now orphans, still technically illegitimate in the eyes of the law, and still a source of potential embarrassment for the crown. Despite the scandal and the attempts to erase their connection, Owen Tudor eventually gained a degree of acceptance. He was released from prison after Catherine's death, though his future was uncertain. However, as young King Henry VI grew older, he seemed to take a more lenient view of his half-brothers. Perhaps he felt a familial bond, or perhaps he recognized their loyalty. Henry VI began to give the Tudor boys positions of honor and trust. Edmund Tudor was eventually made Earl of Richmond, and Jasper Tudor became Earl of Pembroke. This was an astonishing rise. For the sons of a Welsh squire, a testament to their mother's royal blood. The legacy of Catherine of Valois and Owen Tudor's secret union is one of the most astonishing twists in English history. Their elder son, Edmund Tudor, would marry Lady Margaret Beaufort, a formidable noblewoman with royal Plantagenet blood. Their son, Henry Tudor, would go on to defeat King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, ending the Wars of the Roses and founding the Tudor dynasty. This dynasty, born from a scandalous and forbidden union, would rule England for over a century, producing monarchs like Henry VIII and Elizabeth I. The secret romance of Catherine and Owen, a king's mother and a commoner, became the unexpected foundation for one of England's most powerful and famous royal houses. The whispers and disapproving looks of the 15th century ultimately gave way to a powerful legacy, a testament to how even the most scandalous private affairs can shape the course of nations. Number 4. Joanna I of Naples and the royal bloodbath. Kingdom of Naples, in the middle of the 14th century, was a chessboard of shifting alliances, ambitious nobles, and constant intrigue. At the center of this turbulent kingdom sat Joanna I, a young woman who would become one of the most controversial monarchs in medieval history. She inherited the throne in 1343 at the tender age of 16, and from the very beginning her reign was marked by drama, suspicion, and accusations of unspeakable crimes. Joanna was born into the Capetian house of Anjou, a powerful French dynasty that had carved out a kingdom in southern Italy. She was bright, ambitious, and aware of the power she held even as a young queen. Her grandfather, King Robert the Wise, had arranged her marriage years earlier, a common practice for medieval royalty. Her destined husband was her cousin Andrew of Hungary, a member of the powerful Angevin branch that ruled Hungary. The marriage was intended to unite the two Angevin lines, but it quickly became clear that it was a recipe for disaster. Andrew was a year or two younger than Joanna. He was described as crude and boorish, lacking the sophistication and intelligence of his Neapolitan cousins. He was also fiercely ambitious for power, demanding to be crowned King of Naples, not just a consort. This deeply offended the Neapolitan nobles who saw him as an outsider, and equally offended Joanna, who viewed herself as the sole ruler. Chroniclers of the time suggest that deep animosity grew between the young couple. Andrew's Hungarian entourage was also unpopular, alienating the Neapolitan court with their perceived arrogance and grasping nature. The kingdom was divided between factions supporting Joanna and those backing Andrew. Tensions simmered for a little over a year after Joanna's ascension. The official coronation of both Joanna and Andrew was planned for September 1345, but before it could take place, disaster struck. On the night of September 18, 1345, Andrew was murdered. The young royal couple had gone hunting in Aversa, a town near Naples, and were staying in a monastery. In the dead of night, Andrew was discovered by his servants strangled to death. His body was thrown from a window into the garden below. The murder of a king was an unthinkable act, and the immediate suspicion fell upon those closest to him. Joanna was literally in the next room. Contemporary chroniclers like Domenico da Gravina described the horrifying scene. The deed was carried out by a conspiracy of nobles, some of whom were known allies of Joanna. Andrew's chamberlain, his nurse, who was also his wet nurse, and several barons were implicated. The immediate question on everyone's lips was Joanna involved? Did she know about the plot or even orchestrate? The swiftness and brutality of the act, combined with the clear benefits it offered Joanna, removing a rival for power, fueled the darkest rumors. Her detractors, particularly the Hungarian faction led by Andrew's elder brother, King Louis I of Hungary, immediately accused her of complicity. Louis, a powerful and vengeful king, declared that Joanna had murdered his brother and vowed to avenge him. He called her the she-wolf of Apulia. The murder of Andrew unleashed chaos upon the Kingdom of Naples. Louis I of Hungary invaded Naples with a large army in 1347, ostensibly to bring the murderers to justice and to avenge his brother. He quickly conquered much of the kingdom. Joanna, unable to resist his forces, fled by ship to her ancestral lands in Provence, France, which were part of her inheritance. While in Provence, Joanna sought the protection and judgment of Pope Clement VI, who resided in Avignon at the time. The Pope was the feudal overlord of Naples, giving him jurisdiction over the matter. Joanna bravely presented her case, arguing her innocence in Andrew's murder. She insisted that she was a victim of a treacherous plot caught in the crossfire of political machinations. Pope, after hearing extensive testimonies and deliberations, eventually declared Joanna innocent of the murder in 1348. The verdict was somewhat controversial, as the Pope was known to be sympathetic to Joanna and was also wary of Louis of Hungary's growing power in Italy. Some suggest the Pope was swayed by Joanna's charm, or perhaps by a large sum of money she paid him for the sale of Avignon, an act that conveniently provided funds for her defense and solidified papal loyalty. Despite the papal verdict, the stain of suspicion never truly left Joanna. Her innocence was politically declared, but not necessarily historically believed by all. She returned to Naples, but the kingdom remained unstable. Louis of Hungary continued his claims and invasions for years, keeping the kingdom in a constant state of warfare and political upheaval. Joanna's reign was characterized by a desperate struggle to maintain her throne, navigating treacherous political waters and forming alliances to counter Hungarian aggression. Joanna's personal life remained a subject of intense scrutiny and continued to fuel scandal. After Andrew's murder, she remarried several times, each marriage with its own set of political implications and controversies. Her second husband was Louis of Taranto, her cousin, whom she married in 1347. This marriage was particularly shocking, as Louis was widely suspected of being involved in Andrew's murder. Their union further cemented the belief for many that Joanna was indeed guilty. Her third husband was James IV, King of Majorca and Prince of Achaia, whom she married in 1363. Her fourth and final husband was Otto, Duke of Brunswick-Grubenhagen, whom she married in 1376. Each marriage was an attempt to secure her position or gain an ally, yet each also brought new accusations and new challenges. The scandals surrounding Joanna's personal life and alleged crimes continued to plague her reign. In the late 1370s, during the Western Schism, a period when there were two, sometimes three rival popes, Joanna made a critical political mistake. She supported Pope Clement VII, the Avignon Pope, over Pope Urban VI, who was recognized in Rome. This enraged Urban VI, who then excommunicated Joanna and declared her deposed from the throne of Naples. He offered her kingdom to her cousin Charles of Durazzo, a descendant of the Angevin royal family. Charles of Durazzo invaded Naples with Hungarian support in 1381. Joanna, by then in her late 50s, was unable to defend her kingdom. She was besieged in Castelnuovo in Naples, captured and imprisoned. On May 12, 1382, Joanna I of Naples was murdered. She was strangled to death, echoing the fate of her first husband, Andrew. The order for her execution came directly from Charles of Durazzo. Her reign, which began with the suspicious death of her husband, ended with her own violent demise, bringing a brutal symmetry to her scandalous life. Joanna's story became a legendary tale of a queen surrounded by murder and political intrigue. Chroniclers and historians debated her guilt for centuries. Was she a ruthless queen, a cold-blooded killer who eliminated her husband for power? Or was she a pragmatic ruler, a victim of circumstance, forced to make terrible choices in a cutthroat world dominated by men. Regardless of the verdict, her life and reign were a dramatic testament to how personal relationships, when entangled with royal power, could lead to bloodshed, accusations, and a legacy forever marked by scandal. The whispers of murder and the reality of violence became an indelible part of the story of Joanna I of Naples. Number 3. Isabella of France, the She-Wolf, and the Fallen King. In the early 14th century, the marriage of a French princess to an English king was meant to solidify peace, a grand gesture of diplomacy between two powerful nations. Isabella, daughter of Philip IV of France, known as the Fair, was married to Edward II of England in 1308. At the time, she was around 12 years old, and Edward was 23. Isabella was widely known for her beauty and her intelligence, earning her the epithet the She-Wolf of France much later in life. She was a valuable political asset, a link to the powerful French monarchy. However, from the very beginning, their marriage was deeply troubled. Edward II had little interest in his wife, preferring the company of male favorites. His relationship with Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight, was particularly intense and public, drawing the ire of the English nobility. Gaveston's arrogance and Edward's lavish generosity towards him alienated the English barons, who saw their own influence waning. Isabella, a proud French princess, was repeatedly humiliated by her husband's blatant disregard for her and his blatant favoritism towards Gaveston. Chroniclers noted her growing resentment and frustration. The barons eventually forced Edward to exile Gaveston, but the king soon recalled him. This cycle repeated several times until in 1312 the barons, led by Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, took matters into their own hands and captured and executed Gaveston without the king's permission. This act plunged England into political turmoil and deeply affected Edward, who never truly recovered from the loss of his favorite. For a period, Isabella attempted to bridge the gap between her husband and the disgruntled nobility. She bore Edward 4 children, including their heir, the future Edward III. For a time, it seemed she might be a stabilizing force. Edward soon found a new favorite, Hugh Despenser the Younger, and his father, Hugh Despenser the Elder. The Despensers were even more grasping and ambitious than Gaveston. They amassed vast lands and power, effectively controlling the king and dominating the kingdom. This caused widespread outrage among the nobility and commoners alike. Edward's relationship with the Despensers was as intense and exclusive as it had been with Gaveston, leaving Isabella once again marginalized and humiliated. She was stripped of her lands and revenues by the Despensers, and her household was reduced. Her children were even taken from her, and she found herself a virtual prisoner in her own court. By the mid-1320s, Isabella's resentment had reached a breaking point. The kingdom was on the verge of civil war due to the Despensers' tyranny and Edward's weakness. In 1325, a diplomatic opportunity arose. Isabella's brother, Charles IV of France, had seized Edward's French territories. To resolve the dispute, Edward was persuaded to send Isabella to France to negotiate. This trip would prove to be the pivotal moment in the unfolding scandal. Once in France, Isabella refused to return to England. She openly defied Edward and the Despensers. She was no longer simply a neglected wife. She was a queen in rebellion. It was during this time that she formed a close relationship with Roger Mortimer, a powerful and enigmatic English nobleman who had been exiled to France after leading an earlier rebellion against Edward II and the Despensers. Mortimer was a dangerous man, intelligent, ambitious, and utterly ruthless. Their relationship quickly blossomed into a passionate affair, becoming one of the great scandals of the age. The affair between Isabella and Mortimer was not just a personal transgression. It was a political alliance of explosive power. Isabella, the Queen of England, publicly aligned herself with a sworn enemy of her husband. Together they gathered support from disgruntled English exiles and found allies in France. They planned an invasion of England, not just to overthrow the Despensers, but to depose King Edward II himself. This was an unprecedented and shocking move. Queen, leading an army against her own husband, the king, was almost unimaginable. In September 1326, Isabella and Mortimer, along with a small force, landed in England. They were immediately joined by a flood of powerful nobles, knights, and common people who had suffered under Edward and the Despensers. The rebellion was swift and overwhelmingly successful. King Edward II, abandoned by his subjects, fled with the Despensers. Hugh Despenser the Elder was captured and executed first, followed by Hugh Despenser the Younger, who suffered a particularly brutal execution drawn and quartered in front of a vast crowd in Hereford. With the Despensers eliminated, Isabella and Mortimer now held effective power. Edward II was captured in Wales. What followed was a constitutional crisis. A king had never truly been deposed in England before. After much deliberation and pressure, Edward II was forced to abdicate in January 1327 in favor of his young son Edward III. Isabella and Mortimer established a regency council to rule in the young king's name, but it was clear they were the true power behind the throne. The fate of Edward II remained a problem. As long as he lived, there was a risk of a counter-rebellion. The exact circumstances of his death are still debated by historians, but the most widely accepted account is that he was brutally murdered at Berkeley Castle in September 1327, likely on the orders of Mortimer and with Isabella's knowledge. Popular, gruesome story involves him being impaled with a red-hot poker, a death that was both agonizing and left no external marks, intended to convey a warning against homosexual acts, or perhaps just to signify the heinous nature of the regicide. The widespread belief that Isabella and Mortimer were responsible for his death cemented their notoriety. For the next 3 years, Isabella and Mortimer ruled England as regents for Edward III. Their power was absolute, and their relationship continued openly, further fueling the scandal. Mortimer, in particular, grew incredibly arrogant and greedy, accumulating vast wealth and titles. They treated the young King Edward III as little more than a puppet. Their excessive power, coupled with the lingering suspicion of Edward II's murder, eventually alienated many who had initially supported them. However, young Edward III was not content to remain a puppet. By 1330, at the age of 18, he was determined to assert his own authority. With the help of loyal nobles, he staged a daring coup. In October 1330, Edward III and his supporters secretly entered Nottingham Castle, where Isabella and Mortimer were staying. They burst into the royal chambers, capturing Mortimer, despite Isabella's pleas of, "Good son, have pity on the gentle Mortimer." Roger Mortimer was swiftly brought to trial, accused of various crimes including usurping royal power and the murder of Edward II. He was found guilty and publicly executed by hanging at Tyburn in November 1330. Edward III, in a display of calculated mercy or perhaps familial concern, spared his mother's life. Isabella was not executed, nor was she imprisoned in a dungeon. Instead, she was placed under house arrest, largely confined to Castle Rising in Norfolk, though she was allowed to live in comfort and received a generous allowance. Isabella lived for nearly 3 more decades, often visited by her son, Edward III, and her grandchildren. She never returned to the center of political power, but her reputation as the she-wolf endured. The story of her marriage, her affair, and her role in the deposition and likely murder of her husband became a cautionary tale. A legend of a queen who defied all conventions, overturned a king, and plunged a kingdom into unparalleled scandal and bloodshed. Her actions set a precedent for a monarch being forcibly removed from the throne, a dramatic and bloody chapter in medieval English history, all sparked by a marriage that became a disaster and an affair that reshaped a kingdom. Number 2. Eleanor of Aquitaine's double play. Eleanor of Aquitaine was a force of nature, a woman of extraordinary intelligence, ambition, and power in the 12th century. Born around 1122, she was the eldest daughter and heiress of William X, Duke of Aquitaine and Count of Poitou. Her inheritance was vast, encompassing a large and wealthy territory in southwestern France, a region culturally distinct from the northern French lands ruled by the Capetian kings. When her father died in 1137, Eleanor became the most sought-after woman in Europe, the Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right. Just a few months after her father's death, at the age of 15, Eleanor married Louis VII, the new King of France. This marriage was a strategic coup for the French monarchy, instantly doubling the size of the French royal domain. Louis was a pious, scholarly, and rather ascetic man, devout to the point of monasticism. He was very different from Eleanor, who was vibrant, spirited, and accustomed to the lively, sophisticated culture of the Aquitanian court. Their personalities clashed almost immediately. For over a decade, their marriage endured, but it was fraught with tension and disappointments. They traveled together on the Second Crusade to the Holy Land, an expedition that was a military disaster. Eleanor, accompanying her husband, was criticized for her independent spirit and her perceived flamboyant attire. Rumors even circulated that she had an affair with her uncle Raymond of Antioch, though these were likely exaggerated or fabricated by her detractors. The most significant problem, however, was their inability to produce a male heir. After years of marriage, they had only 2 daughters, Marie and Alix. In a world where a male heir was paramount for the stability of a dynasty, this was a grave concern. By 1152, after 15 years of marriage, the relationship between Eleanor and Louis had completely broken down. The lack of a male heir, coupled with their vastly different personalities and Eleanor's independent will, led them to seek an annulment. The official grounds for the annulment were consanguinity, meaning they were too closely related by blood to be legally married under church law. While true, such impediments were often overlooked for political marriages or easily obtained dispensations. The real reasons were undoubtedly political expediency and personal incompatibility. On March 21, 1152, a council of French bishops, with Louis's approval, annulled the marriage. Eleanor was now a free woman, but she was not just any free woman. She was still the Duchess of Aquitaine, the wealthiest heiress in Europe. Her freedom immediately made her a target for ambitious men, all eager to claim her lands. As she traveled back to her own territories, she reportedly narrowly escaped 2 attempts to kidnap and marry her. The next turn of events sent shockwaves across Europe, proving to be one of the most scandalous rebound marriages in medieval history. Less than 2 months after her annulment from Louis VII, in May 1152, Eleanor married Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou. Henry was 11 years her junior, a young, ambitious, and incredibly energetic nobleman. He was the son of Geoffrey Plantagenet and Matilda, granddaughter of William the Conqueror, which gave him a strong claim to the English throne. The marriage was conducted quickly and without the French king's permission. This marriage was a political earthquake. Henry Plantagenet was Louis VII's greatest rival. By marrying Eleanor, Henry immediately gained control of Aquitaine, adding it to his already vast territories in Normandy and Anjou. This created the sprawling Angevin Empire, a domain that stretched from Scotland to the Pyrenees, encompassing more French territory than the actual King of France controlled. Louis VII was furious. He had lost his queen, his vast territories, and gained a formidable and aggressive rival right on his doorstep. He considered the marriage an outrage, an insult to his royal dignity, and a grave threat to the Capetian dynasty. The marriage of Eleanor and Henry sparked decades of intense conflict between the French and English crowns. Louis VII, and later his son Philip Augustus, engaged in continuous warfare with Henry II, who became King of England in 1154, to reclaim Aquitaine and weaken the Angevin Empire. Eleanor's second marriage was also a stormy one, marked by Henry's infidelity and Eleanor's fierce independence. She bore Henry 8 children, including 5 sons, notably Richard the Lionheart and John Bea. While she had fondly produced male heirs, her relationship with Henry deteriorated. By the 1170s, she actively supported her sons in their rebellions against their father, a shocking act for a queen. As a result, Henry II had her imprisoned for 16 years, a testament to her defiant spirit and the severity of their marital discord. She was finally released upon Henry's death in 1189, when her favorite son, Richard, became king. Eleanor's life continued to be at pale even after her imprisonment. She played a crucial role in the reigns of her sons, serving as a powerful regent for Richard while he was on crusade, and working tirelessly to protect her vast estates in France. She continued to be involved in high-stakes politics well into her 70s and 80s, a true matriarch who defied the norms of her age. The scandal of Eleanor's rapid remarriage, particularly to the King of France's greatest enemy, resonated throughout medieval Europe. It was seen as a brazen act of defiance, a testament to Eleanor's unwavering determination to control her own destiny and protect her vast inheritance. Chroniclers of the time debated her character, with some portraying her as manipulative and unfaithful, and others as a strong and intelligent woman navigating a male-dominated world. Regardless of their judgment, her double play, leaving one king and immediately marrying his rival, irrevocably altered the political landscape of Europe for centuries. Her actions were not just a private marital disaster. They were a Geoline earthquake, directly shaping the centuries-long rivalry between England and France, leaving a legacy of power, ambition, and unforgettable scandal. Number 1. Aloys and Abelard, the forbidden intellects. In the bustling, intellectual heart of 12th century Paris, a scandal unfolded that would echo through the centuries, a tale of forbidden love, intellectual passion, and brutal vengeance. At its center were 2 extraordinary minds: Pierre Abelard, a brilliant and médiqué, philosopher and theologian, and Héloïse, his exceptionally intelligent and learned student. Pierre Abelard was a rock star of his time. Born in Brittany in 1079, he was renowned for his sharp intellect, his captivating teaching style, and his daring theological ideas. Students flocked from all over Europe to hear him lecture at Notre Dame Cathedral's schools in Paris, challenged conventional wisdom, questioned authority, and debated with unparalleled skill, making him a celebrated figure, but also a controversial one. He was a cleric, though not yet a priest, which meant he was technically celibate, but this was a common path for scholars of the time. Héloïse was a young woman of unparalleled intellectual promise. Born around 1100 or 1101, she was the niece of Fulbert, a canon at Notre Dame. Héloïse was not only beautiful but also possessed a remarkable grasp of Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, an astonishing feat for any scholar of her era, let alone a woman. She was a rarity, a female scholar in a world dominated by men. Her uncle, eager to foster her talents, sought out the best tutor available. Abelard. Abelard, captivated by Héloïse's intelligence and beauty, convinced Fulbert to let Héloïse live in his own house, supposedly for more intensive instruction. This arrangement highly unusual and unwise, set the stage for the disaster. Abelard, in his own writings, would later admit to his folly, describing how his passion for Heloise consumed him, how he neglected his studies and teaching, and how their private lessons became something far more intimate. Their relationship was not just physical. It was a profound meeting of minds. They found a deep intellectual and emotional connection, bonding over their shared love of philosophy and learning. Their affair was kept a secret for as long as possible, but in a crowded city like Paris, whispers began to spread. The scandal was compounded by the fact that Abelard was a respected scholar, and Heloise was a young woman entrusted to his care. The gravity of their actions was immense. Abelard risked his career, his reputation, and his spiritual standing, while Heloise risked her honor and her future. The secret was brutally revealed when Heloise became pregnant. This was an undeniable sign of their transgression. To protect Heloise's honor and their child, and to prevent Abelard from facing complete ruin, they decided on a clandestine marriage. Marriage was forbidden for clerics who sought advancement in the church, but Abelard was not yet a priest. A secret marriage would legitimize their child, and in theory preserve Abelard's academic prospects, if kept hidden from the church authorities. Heloise initially resisted the idea of marriage, fearing it would ruin Abelard's career more than their illicit affair. But Abelard insisted, and they were secretly married. Heloise gave birth to a son whom they named Astrolabe. To further protect their secret, Heloise took the infant away to be raised by Abelard's family in Brittany. But the marriage itself became another source of fury for Fulbert, Heloise's uncle. He felt that Abelard had not only dishonored his niece by seducing her, but had then added insult to injury by marrying her secretly, thereby continuing to evade public accountability for his actions. Fulbert believed Abelard intended to abandon Heloise or deny the marriage altogether. He sought revenge. In a horrifying act of retribution, Fulbert, along with several accomplices, broke into Abelard's room one night. They brutally castrated him. This horrific act was a common punishment for seduction or rape in some legal codes of the time, meant to symbolize the physical removal of the offending organ. But it was also a deeply personal and physically debilitating act of vengeance, designed to ruin Abelard's life and career completely. The physical mutilation shattered Abelard's life. According to his own account, in his autobiography, Historia Calamitatum, the story of my misfortunes, he was consumed by shame and despair. For a scholar whose identity was so tied to his intellect and public standing, this was a profound humiliation. The event became a sensation, shocking even the hardened citizens of medieval Paris. Following the mutilation, both Abelard and Heloise entered monastic life, a common recourse for those seeking refuge from a scandalous past or societal judgment. Abelard became a monk at the Abbey of St. Denis, while Heloise, following his counsel, took the veil as a nun at the convent of Argenteuche. This was not a choice of spiritual devotion for Heloise, but an act of obedience and perhaps a desperate attempt to salvage some semblance of honor in the face of insurmountable shame. Heloise later became the abbess of the Paraclete, a monastery founded by Abelard. Despite their physical separation and their new lives as monastics, their intellectual and emotional connection endured. They embarked on one of the most famous correspondences in history, a series of letters exchanged over many years. These letters reveal the depth of their love, their intellectual prowess, their enduring pain, and their theological debates. Heloise's letters, in particular, are remarkable for their raw emotion, her unwavering love for Abelard, and her complex reflections on their past and her forced piety. She wrestled with her continued feelings for him, confessing that, even as a nun, she yearned for him. Abelard, in turn, offered her spiritual guidance, but also revealed his own torment. The scandal of Heloise and Abelard became a legendary tale of tragic love, intellectual ambition, and societal punishment. Their story has been retold countless times, becoming a symbol of forbidden passion and the clash between individual desire and the rigid norms of medieval society. Their love, born in the hallowed halls of learning, ended in public disgrace, physical mutilation, and lives spent in monastic seclusion, a testament to how even the most brilliant minds could not escape the devastating consequences of a romantic disaster. Their letters remain a powerful testament to their enduring love and intellect, immortalizing a scandal that broke societal rules and ended in profound suffering, yet also left behind a literary and philosophical legacy.